Welcome back to the deep dive.
It's good to be back.
Today, we're really digging into something. Well, something foundational. We're trying to break down the mental models that dictate why we all argue the way we do.
We are. And our primary source for this is Thomas Sowell's landmark work, A Conflict of Visions.
And to be clear, this is just the first part of a much bigger deep dive.
Yes, exactly. Today, we're taking a very focused look at the beginning, specifically Part 1, which he calls Patterns. It covers the first 5 chapters.
Right. And the mission here, I think, is to get at the why behind the what. I mean, you see it all the time, this strange pattern.
Absolutely.
You see people line up so consistently on opposite sides of issues that have, no real logical connection. Why should someone's view on military spending predict their view on education policy or drug laws?
It's too neat to be a coincidence.
Way too neat, but it also feels too chaotic to be like some grand conspiracy.
And Sowell's argument is that it's neither. It's not a coincidence and it's not a conspiracy. It happens because people aren't really arguing about the policies themselves.
They're arguing from somewhere deeper.
Exactly. They're arguing from fundamentally different premises about how the world works. And these are premises they often can't even articulate themselves. They're just there.
So we're not here to judge which side is right or wrong. That's not the goal.
No, not at all.
The goal is to understand the blueprint, to map out the intellectual DNA of these two opposing worldviews. Because, until you see the blueprint, you just think the builders are acting randomly.
And a big part of that blueprint is acknowledging, right from the start, that reality itself is just. It's too complex. It's bewilderingly complex for any one person to hold in their head.
You just can't. You can't process every single variable, every cause and effect. It's impossible. So we need these visions. They act as our maps.
A necessary map.
They have to simplify things. A map, by definition, leaves things out so you can see the main roads. Without it, you're completely lost in the details.
But that leads directly to what Sowell calls the profound danger. And it's a theme he returns to again and again.
Which is?
Confusing the map with the territory. Confusing your vision with reality itself. Because the things you deliberately left off your map for the sake of simplicity, they might not be negligible at all. In fact, they might be the very things that determine the final outcome. And that's when a helpful map becomes a dangerous illusion.
Okay, so let's get into that. Let's really unpack this idea of a vision, which is the core of Chapter 1, the role of visions. When Sowell uses the word vision, he's not talking about a dream or a hope. It's not a political slogan. It's a technical term.
It is. He calls it a pre-analytic cognitive act.
Pre-analytic. I love that term.
It's so precise. It's your foundational sense of causation. It's the hunch, the gut feeling, the deep-seated assumption you have about how the world works before you apply any logic or build any theory on top of it.
So it's not something you arrive at through careful reasoning.
No, it's the lens through which you perform the reasoning.
And that's what creates the consistency we see in politics.
Absolutely. Think about how these basic assumptions change everything. Primitive man sees leaves rustling in the woods, and his vision, his sense of causation, tells him it's a spirit. That's his pre-analytic act.
Right.
Then Newton comes along with a completely different vision, a world of mechanical, observable forces. Then Einstein shatters that with yet another vision, one of curved space-time. They all saw the same apple fall, but their gut feeling about why it fell was from a different universe.
And that same dynamic is what you see in social thought. You look at someone like Jean-Jacques Rousseau versus, say, Edmund Burke.
A classic contrast.
They're looking at the exact same European society, but they have these utterly different pre-analytic visions of what humans are, what causes social problems, what our limits are.
And those implicit premises, they're the whole game. The vision is the subjective foundation. Then you build a theory, which is the logical framework, and then you use facts and evidence to test the theory.
But, and this seems to be a key point, the facts rarely destroy the vision itself.
Very rarely. It's incredibly hard to kill a vision with data, because the vision itself tells you which data is important, or what even counts as a problem in the first place.
It filters your reality.
It does. Sowell makes the point that in the physical sciences, you do sometimes see a vision just completely collapse.
Yeah.
The world learned at Hiroshima that Einstein's vision wasn't just a subjective idea in his head.
No, it was a map with very real, very objective, and, catastrophic consequences.
Right. Social theories are built the same way, but the testing is so much harder, it's messier, and it often gets buried under layers of moral outrage.
Which brings us back to simplicity. Because reality is this chaotic kaleidoscope, the visions have to be simple. Our minds have to abstract. We pick out a few key parts and treat them as the essential whole, just to be able to function.
And that abstraction is so important for understanding Sowell's method. He argues that the purer a vision is, the less it's complicated by trying to fit in inconvenient facts, the more revealing it is. It shows you its unspoken assumptions.
This is where he brings up the comparison between William Godwin and Karl Marx, which, at first, I admit, seems a bit strange. Why focus on Godwin's inquiry concerning political justice when Marx's Capital was so much more influential?
It's because Marx was building this incredibly complex, sprawling theoretical machine. He was trying to incorporate detailed economic analysis, historical dialectics, all of it. Godwin, writing nearly a century earlier, had a much purer, cleaner version of the same underlying vision.
He strips it down to the studs?
Exactly. His assumptions are laid bare. Man is perfectible. Reason is all-powerful. Institutions are the only source of evil. It's all right there.
So by looking at Godwin, you can see the simple, pure faith in human perfectibility.
That then required Marx to build this enormous and sometimes contradictory theoretical apparatus to justify the same revolutionary endpoint. Godwin gives you the premise. Marx gives you the complex execution.
The vision is the source code.
A great way to put it. And ultimately, these visions fill in the huge gaps in our knowledge. Most of us, even the experts, are experts in one tiny area. A doctor might have very detailed, constrained views on healthcare policy based on experience.
But then they'll talk about foreign trade or crime.
And they fall back on a completely untested, often emotional political vision, because it's the only map they have for that territory.
So while the daily fights we see in the news, the votes and the laws, are often about conflicts of interest,
The deeper current, the historical tide that decides which interests even matter, is driven by these conflicts of visions. It shapes the whole landscape.
Okay, that's a perfect setup for the core division then. We're moving into the real heart of the book here, Chapter 2, the constrained and unconstrained visions. And it all starts with their opposing views on human nature.
It has to. As Sowell quotes Walter Lippmann, at the core of every moral code, there is a picture of human nature, a map of the universe.
And these two maps could not be more different.
Let's start with the constrained vision. This is the worldview of thinkers like Adam Smith, Edmund Burke, Alexander Hamilton.
What's the core idea?
The core idea is that man is inherently and permanently limited, both morally and intellectually. So any social good, any progress, has to be achieved by working with or around those limitations, not by trying to magically wish them away.
And the anecdote he uses to illustrate this is just unforgettable. It's from Adam Smith's The Theory of Moral Sentiments, the China earthquake story.
Yes, let's walk through that because it's so powerful. Smith asks you to imagine a sophisticated, humane European man. He's sitting comfortably at home.
And he gets the news that a horrific earthquake has just swallowed the entire empire of China, 100 million people gone.
What's his reaction? Smith says the man would express sincere sorrow. He'd reflect on the fragility of life, the tragedy of it all, and then
he'd go back to his business, eat his dinner, and sleep soundly through the night.
Exactly. The tragedy is real, but it's abstract. It's too distant to truly pierce his personal bubble.
But then Smith flips the script. What if that same man was told that tomorrow he was going to lose his own little finger?
Now he's not sleeping. He's consumed by anxiety and anguish. The personal immediate pain completely eclipses the abstract, distant ruin of millions.
And this is the crucial part. Smith doesn't present this as a moral failing to be condemned.
No. He treats this profound egocentricity as an inherent fact of life. It's a structural constraint on human empathy. Our moral radius is tragically, unchangeably narrow.
So for the constrained vision, the whole game isn't about trying to make people care more about the earthquake than their own finger. That's a fool's errand.
Vain and pointless. The challenge is to design systems that can produce good outcomes, given that people will always care more about their finger. How do you harness that powerful self-interest for the social good?
This means you have to accept that trade-offs are everywhere. They're inevitable.
Absolutely. Because human empathy is limited and resources are scarce, you can never achieve the perfect, best imaginable outcome. You can only shoot for the best possible outcome within those constraints. The best is the enemy of the good.
Which is why, for this vision, prudence is the most important virtue.
The cardinal virtue. Edmund Burke called prudence the first of all virtues. Because if every choice involves a trade-off, then the highest moral skill is being able to wisely weigh the competing costs and benefits.
Nothing is good in the abstract.
Burke said, nothing is good. but in proportion and with reference. There are no absolute solutions, only prudent compromises.
Okay, so now let's pivot. Let's look at the complete opposite view, the unconstrained vision. This is William Godwin, the Marquis de Condorcet.
And this vision starts by rejecting that entire picture of fixed, tragic limits.
For them, man is, what's the word he used?
Perfectible. Not perfect now, but capable of continuous improvement, with no fixed ceiling on his moral or intellectual potential. Godwin said, we can come nearer and nearer, and Condorcet talked about a potential that was truly indefinite.
So in this worldview, all the flaws we see, selfishness, crime, poverty, war, they aren't hardwired into the human species.
No, they're seen as products of a corrupt environment. Bad institutions, backwards traditions, a lack of education or moral commitment. They are correctable flaws.
If the problem isn't the raw material human nature, then it has to be the factory settings, the institutions. You can fix it.
Which leads directly to the critical importance of intention.
Right. Godwin said that for an action to be truly virtuous, it has to be intended to benefit others. He said intention is of the essence of virtue.
And this is a massive departure from the constrained vision. Because if good intentions are the essence of virtue, then you have to reject things like incentives.
Like rewards and punishments.
Godwin called them unworthy and unnecessary expedients. Because if you pay someone to do a good deed, you're not cultivating their higher sense of social duty, you're just appealing to their base self-interest. You're reinforcing the very selfishness you're trying to eliminate.
I see the logic. If you believe man is capable of pure altruism, then offering him a bonus for being altruistic is actually an insult. It's counterproductive.
It is. And this changes how you view social evils. For the unconstrained vision, if human options aren't inherently limited, then things like war and poverty aren't tragic inevitabilities. They cry out for explanation and for solutions.
They're anomalies. They must have a specific, identifiable cause that can be rooted out and fixed.
Whereas the constrained vision sees war and poverty as tragically part of the baseline human condition, for them, the anomaly that cries out for explanation is the rare, fragile period of peace and prosperity.
So one side is looking for solutions, the other is managing trade-offs.
That's the fundamental divide. And it plays out in how they see causation. For the constrained vision, especially someone like Adam Smith, the greatest social benefits are often completely unintended.
The famous invisible hand?
The butcher, the brewer, the baker. They provide your dinner not from their benevolence, but from the regard to their own interest. A capitalist's mean rapacity, his selfish desire for profit, gets channeled by the market system into producing social good. The result is good, even if the intention was morally questionable.
And that whole category, unintentional social benefit, is what, basically missing from the unconstrained vision?
It's worse than missing. It's often seen as morally offensive. If intention is the essence of virtue, a system that produces good results from selfish motives is inherently corrupt. It has to be replaced with a system that cultivates a higher sense of social duty.
You can see these visions literally built into the architecture of government.
Oh, absolutely. The American Constitution is probably the greatest physical monument to the constrained vision ever created.
It's a document built on pure distrust.
Total distrust. The entire elaborate system of checks and balances, separation of powers, federalism, it's all designed to pit ambition against ambition, to assume that people in power will be self-interested and to use that self-interest to control them.
The Federalist Papers say it outright. What is government itself but the greatest of all reflections on human nature? It assumes men are not angels, so you need external controls. It's a system for managing trade-offs.
Now contrast that with the spirit of the French Revolution, especially in its early optimistic phases, guided by thinkers like Condorcet.
What was their assumption?
The assumption was that the evil wasn't inherent in human nature. It was localized in a few corrupt aristocrats or specific traitors who betrayed the people's will. Condorcet openly condemned constitutional counterweights as a needless complication.
Why complicate things if the people's will is pure and rational?
Exactly. They were seeking a solution, a clean, rational design that would unleash the natural goodness of man. They weren't trying to manage an inevitable, permanent conflict within human nature itself.
The unconstrained vision is willing to accept huge, upfront sacrifices.
In the name of achieving that perfect final solution. That's Condorcet's dream of the eventual reconciliation, of the interests each with the interests of all, a future where the trade-off itself is eliminated.
While the constrained vision sees that as a dangerous fantasy.
A fantasy that leads to tyranny. Because in the pursuit of the impossible, you end up destroying the good that's actually possible. And that's really the essence of Chapter 2. Fixed human nature versus perfectible human nature.
Okay, so if the visions disagree on the raw material man, it logically follows that they'll disagree on how to use it. This takes us to Chapter 3 and their different visions of knowledge and reason.
Right. Where does useful knowledge actually reside, and how should a society mobilize it?
Let's start with the constrained view again. They believe in what Sowell calls systemic rationality.
This is the idea that real, useful knowledge is fundamentally distributed. It's scattered in bits and pieces among millions of people. It's embedded in tradition, in habits, in institutions. It is the social experience of the many, not the articulated reason of a few brilliant minds.
So it's not the kind of knowledge you can write down in a textbook or a 5-point plan.
Often no. Burke called it wisdom without reflection. It's practical. It's often subconscious. Its only validation is that it has survived the test of time. A tradition exists for a reason, even if no one alive today can articulate what that reason is.
This is F.A. Hayek's big contribution, right? The knowledge problem.
Exactly. Hayek argued that since the knowledge needed to run a complex society is dispersed among millions, no central planner, no committee of experts could ever possibly gather and use it effectively.
Which means you have to be incredibly careful about change.
Extremely circumspect. Just because you can spot a flaw in an old institution doesn't mean you should tear it down. Because the hidden wisdom, the systemic knowledge that institution embodies, might be far more valuable than the obvious flaw, is costly.
This vision has a deep, deep skepticism of the man in the armchair, the pure theorist.
A profound skepticism. Alexander Hamilton wrote in The Federalist that only a very small part of political wisdom is gained in the closet. You have to learn it in the messy reality of governing. Burke was terrified of intellectuals who disdain tested experience and want to be the master of society, redesigning it from scratch based on a logical diagram.
Okay, so let's flip it. The unconstrained vision. They champion what's called articulated rationality.
For them, reason with a capital R is king. Knowledge is explicit, it's communicable, and it's concentrated in what they call cultivated minds.
The best and the brightest.
The intellectual elite. In this view, if you can't justify a policy or a tradition with clear, linear, articulated logic, it's probably just prejudice and should be discarded.
This is Godwin again, just being completely consistent. He dismissed tradition as being unreasonably magnified. He called the pretense of collective wisdom the most palpable of all impostures.
It leads to an inherent distrust of the past. Why should we be shackled by the decisions of our less enlightened ancestors? Condorcet said that everything that bears the imprint of time must inspire distrust more than respect.
The implication seems pretty clear. If the real knowledge is held by the enlightened few,
then the goal of politics is to bring the rest of society up to the height of knowledge already existing among the enlightened members. Progress is a top-down process of education and rational persuasion.
And this is where the constrained vision sees the ultimate danger. The man of system, as Adam Smith called him.
Yes, the intellectual who sits in his study and imagines he can arrange the members of society like pieces on a chessboard. He has this perfect, elegant plan, but he forgets that the pieces on the human chessboard have a motion of their own.
They don't just go where the planner tells them to.
Exactly. As Thomas Hobbes warned centuries ago, there's nothing so absurd but may be found in the books of philosophers.
So the fundamental trade-off is this. Is the accumulated systemic experience of the many wiser than the concentrated, articulated reason of the few?
That's the question. For the unconstrained, if something exists, it needs a specific, articulable reason. If you can't tell me exactly why we do it this way, it's irrational and we should stop.
But for the constrained?
For the constrained, everything may have a cause, but we might be biologically incapable of fully articulating it. Systems like the free market or common law work because they bring to bear reasons unknown to any given individual. They mobilize more knowledge than any single mind could possess.
You can see this tension perfectly in debates about judicial philosophy.
It's the ideal modern application. You have Oliver Wendell Holmes Jr., a giant of the constrained tradition in law.
And what was his famous line?
The life of the law has not been logic. It has been experience.
That's such a powerful summary of the whole vision.
It is. For Holmes, the law was an intuition of experience which outruns analysis. Legal precedent isn't just about slavishly following old rules. It's about respecting the accumulated wisdom of generations of judges who dealt with real, concrete problems. The law evolves, it isn't designed.
And you contrast that with the modern unconstrained approach. Someone like Ronald Dworkin, who argues for an activist court.
The activist court is the embodiment of articulated rationality. A judge looks at the existing law, the messy, evolved, systemic outcome, and measures it against their own explicit rational ideal of justice or morality.
And if it doesn't measure up?
They change it. They read fresh moral insight into the Constitution. They reject the unarticulated wisdom of historical precedent, because the past is, by definition, suspect.
So you have two completely different job descriptions for a judge. The constrained judge asks, what does the accumulated experience of the law say? The unconstrained judge asks, what does my superior moral reason say is right now?
And those two questions will lead you to vastly different places every single time.
Okay, so this disagreement about man and knowledge has to lead to a disagreement about how society itself functions. This takes us to Chapter 4 on social processes. Is society an organism that grows or a machine that's built?
That's the perfect way to frame it. And the constrained vision, of course, relies on the idea of evolved order.
What's the best model for that?
Language. Language is the purest example. It's unbelievably complex, subtle, and effective. Yet nobody designed it. There was no committee that invented English grammar.
Right, it just grew.
It evolved systemically. Its rationality was validated by the daily use of millions of people over centuries, not by the explicit plan of a few experts.
And so in politics, the same logic applies. You have to be cautious.
Prudence over ambition. Burke's great point was that a state needs ways to change, of course, but you should never subject the whole system to untried speculations. You make small, incremental changes. You watch the good or ill success of the first tiny step before you dare take the second.
The focus is on perfecting the process, not dictating the goal.
Yes, that is a crucial distinction. The constrained vision focuses on incentives and modes of interaction, the rules of the game. They believe that if you get the process right, good outcomes will emerge, often in ways you didn't intend.
Okay, now the unconstrained vision. They favor designed order. They see social problems as engineering problems.
Exactly. This follows directly from Godwin's belief that truth is not hard of acquisition. If the answers are obvious and straightforward,
then what's stopping us?
Only bad institutions, outdated, irrational structures. So the solution is an engineering one. Pare down the old faulty structure and design a new, rational one to replace it.
This leads to a huge reliance on experts.
It has to. People like Thorstein Veblen saw social issues as nothing more than technical matters requiring requisite expertise. And Condorcet was calling for a social science centuries ago, one that would use statistics and probability to design a better society, the same way a civil engineer designs a safer bridge.
The faith is in the blueprint. Get the design right, and the people will function correctly within it.
Right. And these different approaches to process lead to completely different views on the value of time and stability.
The constrained view treasures stability.
Above almost all else. Things that bind the future, constitutions, legal precedents, traditions, are seen as incredibly valuable. Why? Because a stable, predictable set of rules is more important for society than the potential benefit of any single brilliant new idea that someone might have tomorrow.
This is Burke's line about the evils of inconstancy being 10,000 times worse than those of obstinacy.
And Adam Smith's shocking statement, the peace and order of society is of more importance than even the relief of the miserable. The cost of destabilizing the process is almost always higher than the potential benefit of a specific outcome.
But for the unconstrained vision, that's just irrational. That's being ruled by the dead hand of the past.
Completely irrational. It's a huge cost. Why should we be bound by decisions made by people with lesser knowledge than we have now? Godwin asks, am I supposed to be precluded from using better information for the whole course of my life just because of some old promise or law?
So they want maximum flexibility, the ability to pivot and change course as soon as new, better information becomes available.
Yes. For them, the process cost of disruption is worth it if you can achieve the perfect result. The solution justifies tearing down the old system.
And this connects back to causation. In the constrained vision, weird, unexpected results are just part of the deal.
They're inherent in the complexity of the world. It requires trade-offs.
Like the paradox of thrift. If everyone individually decides to save more money, the collective result can be a recession and less overall saving. The individual intention has the opposite systemic effect.
A classic example. The constrained response is to say, okay, that's a weird limitation of the system. How do we design a process to manage that trade-off? The unconstrained vision, on the other hand, judges policies by their stated results. If an action with good intentions produces a bad result, it's not seen as a systemic paradox.
It's seen as a failure.
A failure caused by opposition or a lack of commitment or just blindness to the obvious solution. The system itself must be fundamentally flawed if it can't translate good intentions directly into good results.
Okay, we've laid out the patterns across nature, knowledge, and process. Now in Chapter 5, Sowell tries to make these visions more operational, more concrete.
Right. Chapter 5 is varieties and dynamics of visions. To move beyond just suggestive contrasts, we need a way to actually define and categorize what we're seeing in the real world.
And he gives us 2 key criteria for that.
2 key questions, really. First, what is the locus of discretion? And second, what is the mode of discretion?
In plain English, where is the power to choose located, and how is that choice being made?
Exactly. So in the constrained operational mode, the locus of discretion is widely dispersed. The power to choose is scattered among millions of individuals, consumers, voters, entrepreneurs.
And the mode of discretion
Is systemic interaction. People make choices for their own individual benefit, and the common good, if it's achieved at all, is an unintended consequence of that interaction. The free market is the textbook example.
Okay, so then the unconstrained operational mode is the opposite. The locus of discretion is concentrated.
It's held by surrogates, a panel of experts, a Supreme Court, a central planning agency, an enlightened political leader.
And the mode of discretion is deliberate, explicit, rational choice.
Yes. They are making decisions based on explicitly rationalistic grounds with a direct intention of serving the common good.
When you lay it out like that, you can see why the conflict is just baked in. It's inevitable.
It is, because from the constrained point of view, the essential ingredients for the unconstrained, model-perfect knowledge, selfless morality, unwavering fortitude, they just don't exist in human beings. Not in the masses, and not in the elites who are supposed to be making the decisions.
The best kind of world for the person in the unconstrained vision is a recipe for disaster for the person in the constrained vision.
It's disastrous for man as he actually is, according to the constrained vision. The starting points are so mutually exclusive that they're doomed to be adversaries on almost every issue.
But Sowell is careful to say that this isn't a perfect, rigid binary. Some very important thinkers are actually hybrids.
Yes, and looking at the hybrids is incredibly revealing. He brings up Jeremy Bentham, the father of utilitarianism, as a perfect example of a strange mix.
So how does Bentham fit or not fit?
Well, Bentham had a completely constrained view of human nature. He believed man was incurably selfish, driven only by a calculus of pleasure and pain. He totally rejected Godwin's idea of intentional virtue. He said you need incentives, rewards, and punishments enforced by the state.
That sounds completely constrained, so where's the unconstrained part?
The unconstrained part is his boundless faith in the power of articulated reason to design the perfect social machine. He believed a small group of enlightened, expert surrogates could sit down and calculate the greatest good for the greatest number.
So he thought man was dumb and selfish, but that a few smart men could build a perfect system to manage all the dumb, selfish people.
That's a blunt way of putting it, but yes. It's an exercise in pure, articulated, rationalistic power.
Yeah.
His economics were constrained. He followed Adam Smith on laissez-faire because the dispersed market worked there. But his political and legal ideas were radically unconstrained, demanding centralized, calculated reform of everything.
And then there's John Stuart Mill, who's even harder to pin down.
Mill is fascinating because he seems to have lived right on the fault line. He was intellectually eclectic. He would make these bold, ringing statements that sound purely unconstrained.
Like what?
Like saying that laws are made, not evolved, and that the distribution of wealth is purely a matter of human institutions. The implication is that you can just redesign the institutions to get any distribution you want.
Textbook unconstrained thinking. But then
he would immediately attach a devastating proviso straight from the constrained vision. He'd say something like, yes, we can design new laws, but they will be completely ineffective unless they accord with the long-standing traditions and customs of the people.
Wow, so that's a huge internal tension.
Massive. He's saying, my articulated reason can design a perfect system, but the unarticulated, systemic knowledge embedded in tradition will ultimately decide if my design works. He's acknowledging both powers at once.
His general lean was more unconstrained, though.
I think so, yes. His desire for progress and social improvement pushed him that way. But the constant ambiguity makes him a key figure for understanding the dynamics of this conflict. He was living the conflict in his own mind.
So the big takeaway from these first 5 chapters is just how durable this pattern is. These two visions, constrained and unconstrained, they just keep reappearing century after century across every field of thought.
They do, because they are rooted in the most fundamental disagreements you can have. What are we? What can we know? And how do we build a society based on those answers? Every modern debate we have is just another chapter in that same ancient conflict.
We've laid out 2 completely different maps for navigating the world, and as we've seen, they're just fundamentally incompatible.
That's the core insight of Part 1. The constrained vision is, at its heart, a tragic vision. It focuses on perfecting the process, accepting trade-offs, and respecting systemic, dispersed knowledge.
While the unconstrained vision is a moral vision, it focuses on achieving the highest ideal, demanding perfect solutions, and trusting in articulated elite knowledge.
Right.
So now when you hear a debate about, say, central planning versus free markets or judicial activism versus originalism,
You're instantly better informed. You can see past the surface issue and identify the underlying vision that's really being argued.
and seeing that pattern is what sets us up for the next part of this deep dive, where Sowell applies this framework to our most cherished goals: equality, power, and justice.
Because if you can't even agree on what a human being is capable of, you are definitely not going to agree on what a just society actually looks like.
Which leaves us with a final thought to bridge us to that next session. Just think for a moment about how different your entire pursuit of justice has to be depending on which of these maps you're using.
If justice, for you, is what the constrained vision says it is, a process characteristic, then a foot race is just if everyone starts at the same line and the rules are the same for everyone, period. Who wins is irrelevant to the justice of the process.
But if you hold the unconstrained vision,
Then justice is a result characteristic. The final outcome has to meet some moral standard. If the same people keep winning the race itself is unjust, and you have to intervene to change the results.
which raises the huge question Sowell dives into next. What does it actually mean to pursue justice in a world of inherent human limitations? And is the passionate pursuit of a perfect ideal sometimes the greatest enemy of a decent, stable society?
That question is as relevant today as it was 200 years ago.
Yeah.
It really defines our world.